Welcome, Cynthia Hauk, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. So I have you on. You're a mindful art trainer and coach, and that could be so many things. But in your own words, can you please tell what you do to the audience and to the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mainly do two things. So I offer mindfulness, meditation, and really simple art classes to help people de stress. So it's usually when people are really busy and overwhelmed. They've maybe tried to meditate or they don't consider themselves to be an artist, but they're looking for another tool that can just help them have a bit more breathing space in their day. So I do that with online classes. And then the other main part that I do is I teach mindful art teacher trainings and coaching. And that's really for artists, yoga teachers, art teachers, creative entrepreneurs, therapists, life coaches who, again, are wanting to add in some extra tools to perhaps some of the modalities they already do, with a focus on mindset, on helping shift people's mindsets and move through creative blocks. And I use the term creative really loosely. So it's not necessarily creative, with art making on paper, but there's so many different ways we can be creative. So moving through those blocks.
And what is a common thread you get from these people that are training with you? They come after the class and they say, "This was really XYZ," and they're saying this was great, or they're like, "I feel so less stressed now." It could be a gambit of different things. What's a common thread that you get from those people who go seek your training?
Yeah, it is a couple of things I hear most often. One is just that they do feel less stressed, that they have more space for themselves. The other thing that I see most commonly through the training is that the people that come and work with me, they have what I like to call a coursitis. So they've already
Mm,
taken a lot of certifications. They're usually really qualified already in their field. And for whatever reason, and there's usually a handful of reasons, they're blocking themselves. And so the main thing that I hear afterwards is that they're excited that they've been able to move through those things. So I incorporate and infuse mindfulness in all of it. And to me, I see that as a mirror. It's just a way of looking back at ourselves and in the present moment without judgment.
mhm.
So many people I work with don't do the things they want to do in the world because they don't have confidence or because they feel overwhelmed. They have a really strong inner critic. So a lot of it is just moving through those blocks. And so that's usually what I hear back.
And that inner critic, I mean, that can come from anywhere. It can come from our ego, it can come from just our subconscious mind. And I remember the most prominent time this happened to me. And I'm sure it happened several other times, but the times that I can always think about when someone tells me about my inner critic or I wasn't good enough
Mm.
was when I was student teaching and I was getting ready to graduate from student teaching leave. And I was like, "I'm not ready yet." And my grammar teacher was like, "You're ready." And I was like, "No," but in my head, I wasn't ready. I had so much more to learn from him that I was saying, "I'm not him. I'm not at his level. So I can't be ready. I'm not you yet." And then, that was my goal, to be just as good or better. So that right there started to jump in my mind. But I was equipped with everything I needed to be successful. And when I went into the classroom after the student teaching, it was a breeze. It was because of all their teachings, all their time. But it was that moment right there where I had to make a choice. Was I ready or was I not ready? And I mean, I had great mentors, great cooperating teachers throughout my whole career, my whole life. And, that moment right there saying, "You're ready," it just resonated with me so much. Why do you think people just continually go get training, 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 but they are ready, but they think they're not ready?
It's a way to stay safe.
Mm,
I think that our inner critic can be really sneaky. And one of the things our inner critic can say to us is that you're not ready. You need more training. You need another certification. You need X, Y, and Z before you put yourself out in the world in a way that feels really vulnerable and scary and outside of our comfort zone. And so I often say with the people I work with, the closer we get to that edge of ours, the louder that inner voice tends to get.
mm,
um, and I think it's important to be aware of areas that we can improve on. And I'm a life learner, and as a teacher, obviously, really appreciate teaching. And I think at the same time, there can be that point where we just need to have a really honest look with ourselves and say, do I really need X, Y, and Z to move forward? Can I take small steps and start putting myself out in the world with everything I already have, and just really reflect on, the path we have taken? In that example you just shared, you already had so much teaching and training that you had done. So I'm a huge proponent and fan of what I call Kaizen Muse method, or Kaizen Muse steps, which someone else coined, but really having those small incremental steps that we can take as a way of sort of edging our inner critic and edging that comfort zone. So it's still a little bit scary and uncomfortable, but it's not so overwhelming where we're frozen and stuck. Because I find the people that I work with, that's the place that they're in. They feel really stuck, and they've been on that hamster wheel for years. Oftentimes they're just taking, a new certification, but not putting their own teaching out in the world.
And that's one of the first questions I ask my clients. That's like, do you feel stuck? Because then I'll get a good understanding of where they are mentally. Because if they feel stuck, then we have to just figure out what that stuck means for them. Many people get down that road, or they want to do something in their life and they have been trying to do something, whether it be getting in shape, starting a different profession, career, hobby, whatever it be. They might start, but they don't finish. So they fall back to who they are, to their comfort zone per se. And then they feel stuck, like they can't get out. But it's just like that fear, or that voice that you were saying, as soon as you get closer to that edge and you're about to cross over to the next, I guess, maybe better part of your life, everyone's saying, hey, don't go that way. That is going to equal a lot of work. We don't like a lot of work. So just come back, take it easy. We'll all be okay. We'll all be calm. That goes into the realm of self-sabotage. I'm self-sabotaging my life because I have a voice inside of me saying, don't go more, don't be more. So that voice, how can we be mindful? How can we maybe implement ways to stop self-sabotaging ourselves so much?
I love that question. I feel like you and I could probably talk about that at length for a really long time.
Yeah.
So I'll share one of the tools that I use that is really simple, that I've done for quite some time, is actually a right and left-handed practice. So, or dominant and non-dominant handed practice, where your dominant hand can ask the question. So it's coming from perhaps, your adult self, or that part of you that is aware of the fact that you are self-sabotaging and blocking yourself. So that question might just be as simple as, why do I feel stuck? Or what's holding me back? Or what is the thing that I need to do next to move forward, to not be stuck? So some sort of question that feels in alignment with what you're feeling right now, but really simple. And then using your non-dominant hand, you can have space for a response. And the reason why it's the non-dominant hand, there's a handful of reasons, but usually, unless you're ambidextrous already, you can't write at length. So you have to keep your answers really short and simple. There's also this childlike quality to your handwriting. If you ever try it, I just look like I'm scribbling. It's terrible and wonderful. And so there's this childlike quality. And for me, and for a lot of the people I've worked with, usually it's a younger part of us that's feeling stuck and blocked and scared and holding back. And so it's just another way we can tap into that. We're also switching things with our brain. We're feeling the sensations of the pen and the paper, moving, and that texture. So it's a way we can be more present. So automatically, I see it as more of a mindfulness practice. The key part with that, with mindfulness, is the non-judgment part. So that's kind of the piece to notice as you're answering, just coming back to that reminder of, you're not going to judge whatever you think of or write. You can sort of see it as an experiment. And I normally recommend doing that 3 to 5 times. So you would ask the question, have a really simple answer. And then depending on what comes up, you can, again, have a really simple question just to dive in a little bit deeper. So that's one practice that I share a lot of times and that I do for myself, because I think first and foremost, we need some sort of clarity. And we don't necessarily need to understand everything, but we need to know, are we feeling overwhelmed because, we're too busy and we don't give ourselves time to live into our dreams? Are we feeling like we have self-limiting beliefs? Are we dealing with other people's drama? Like, we just have to be aware of what is the thing that potentially is pulling our attention away. And then once we have more of that awareness, then usually I like to do those Kaizen Muse steps. So just breaking down really, really simple, small things that we can start inching our way towards movement, just so we're not frozen and stuck.
And what you said is kind of triggered my brain because that's how my brain works, where we're writing with our left hand and we have a childlike script. And if I wrote on my notepad in front of me with my left hand, I wouldn't know the difference between a kindergartner and me. It would be just like that. Let's go to the idea of a weed in your garden. If you snip the top of your weed, the weed will grow. We have to take the weed from the roots. So when we mentally, and this is probably a subconscious level too, when we start writing with our left hand and we have that childlike script, we go maybe to the root of our problems, which typically stems from childhood. We have some type of childhood trauma where it could be parent, relationship, family, school, whatever it be, right? There's something that is having our brain stop and saying, okay, well, we got to be careful, right? Because we learned at some point in our life not to do something. Whether it's, okay, in class, we need to be still, not say anything, or someone yelled at us because we did the wrong move in the gym class, right? Whatever it be, right? That affects us long term. And if we can find that reason, going back to our childhood, going back to the roots, we can actually take some time and say, okay, well, what's the problem? The root, right? Childhood. We can look around, we can figure out, all right, this needs to be adjusted, and then we can adjust it. Or we can maybe put some awareness to it saying, I was able to overcome that. And then they overcame it. So now that belief that they once had subconsciously is now a conscious victory. So they're not going to allow that to keep them stuck anymore. So the idea of going back to being a kid and then handling the root problem, pulling up the root, and then setting us free per se, so we can kind of go out and I guess not be stuck or self-sabotage ourselves because we have an anchor in our life. And many times that happens from school, can happen with family. Typically, you're going to get a lot of stuff in school. School is just going to be one of those heavy moments where many people are going to be open about their opinions, their beliefs. And when you're young, peer acceptance is so big. And I remember just being a teacher, I went to art class one day. Everyone is so self-conscious about their artwork, where it's like, I don't want you to see my artwork because it's not done, right? It's a masterpiece in the making, but at the same time, I'm still insecure about that. Do you find that when you're working with people through different methods or different arts, that they're self-conscious about the work that they're doing?
Absolutely. And I hear that a lot, especially because the practices that I teach and share combine mindfulness and really simple art activities. So a lot of the immediate response is, I'm not creative or I'm not artistic. And that can carry over very easily to their other projects that they're doing that aren't, quote unquote, art related. And so that judgment, that really quick knee jerk judgment comes up often when I'm talking with people. And I think to your point, there is a lot tied in with when people are younger. And Brene Brown, I love her, and she talks about in her shame resiliency research that 80% of people have some sort of shame story about creativity when they're under the age of like 6, somewhere around there. And so there is this dampering that can happen at some point in our lives, and we start to associate that with things. Some people will just say like, oh, I'm terrible at remembering names. And you make that statement and then you just believe that about yourself. You have this thing about your identity. So I think the other part about that writing exercise that I really like is that it pulls you out of the story, because you can't write a lot when you're writing with your non-dominant hand. So if you imagine that you're like hanging out with a friend and you're catching up and you're getting worked up about something you feel frozen or stuck with, we could talk at length and just, go on a huge rant and kind of spiral into that story. And that necessarily isn't going to shift us or have any movement. And so having these different ways that we can be aware of what we tell ourselves that may not be true, that very likely if it's a negative thing we're telling ourselves, it's not true. It's just coming from our inner critic that's trying to keep us safe. That if we can find a way to just witness that and notice it and be curious about it, and then have some sort of intentional, inspired, spirited action and small steps to shift the needle, to start to change the identity that we have with that belief. And I just think it's so powerful.
And that touches base on creativity, where people have the opportunity to be creative. And if you can think back just high school, college, there's going to be many classes that don't offer the opportunity for creativity. There's a right answer. And if you don't get the right answer,
Mm.
it's wrong. So we can't be creative in the sense of, well, in biology, it could be this, right? So it could be like a theory, hypothesis, whatever it be. No, no, no. This is the answer, right? So we don't have the opportunity sometimes to be creative. So school actually kind of muffles our creativity to a certain point where, yes, we want to be correct when we draw like a bunch of circles and we say it's a house. It's probably not a house, right? It's a bunch of circles. But at the same time, we can say that's interesting. And then we can offer them, well, there's homes that are going to be in a like a cylinder shape. So we can show them some of those homes so they can look at those homes and then say, okay, I'm going to mimic that house versus I'm just drawing something and then I call it whatever. As adults, we take a child and we kind of stare them in a way of, right, this is what is accepted. Because if I wrote something on a piece of paper and I told you that, or let's use colors, for example. I'm a guy, I see colors different. If I have this pen here, what color is this pen? You might say it's black. I might say, like it could be gray or something, and or yellow. And you're like, no, 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 it's black, right? I'm trying to be creative, thinking, oh, so it writes yellow, but the pen is actually black. It looks black. What happens there is like, okay, I can't even say what color this pen is. To a child, though, that's what they're thinking. For an adult, we have that critical thinking where we can say, all right, yeah, she's right. I was wrong. But for a kid, now they're growing up with that limiting belief. Okay, well, I can't even be creative anymore. And then now, as adults, that's why they don't want to be so creative, really. It's like,
Mm.
well, I have a voice. I'm really afraid to say my voice because I have been ridiculed in my past about it. So I'm just going to be silent. And I would rather not show my work or not present because there's going to be a chance that someone is going to say something. And that goes into mindfulness, I think, too, because we are no longer mindful of what has happened to us. We try to ignore it, even though that
Mm.
experience has already affected our life. So if we become mindful of who we are today, then we can say, I'm not that kid anymore. And that was something I had to do. I'm not that kid that I was in high school and elementary. I'm a different person. So that person doesn't define me, even though at one point he did, but today he doesn't. So if I want to be creative, I can be creative. If I want to be artsy, I can be artsy. Whatever I decide, I can be, being mindful of what you want and what you put forward. But people don't think that way. People say, I'm just not good at drawing. I'm just,
Mm.
like I was never a good artist. I'm not a good painter. And they just have those limiting beliefs, those self-doubts that they just carry along with them. What is something that you can do to figuratively snip that thread in their mind from their adult life to their childhood life using art?
Mm. I love that question. For me, it comes down to practice. Anything, if we're curious to try something new, if somebody wanted to play piano, we wouldn't expect ourselves to be able to play a whole sonata the moment we sit down to the piano if we've never played before. There's certain areas and things in our life that I think we can give ourselves a bit more compassion because, oh, of course, it would take, time and practice and effort to hone in on that skill. I think sometimes with creativity and certain things or practices like drawing or painting, as an example, there can be blocks where people just, say, oh, I can't do that. Or even math, like, I know some people, math is just not their thing. For me, it comes down to really intentional practice. And that's why I love marrying mindfulness and meditation with the art activities. It doesn't have to be art activities. It could be mindfulness and meditation with whatever skill you're curious about kind of honing in on. And so the reason why that mindfulness is really important is because it's holding it softly I like to think of it as like a wide container. So if I was curious about exploring a skill, I'm holding it in a big well or big container. So it's large enough for me to play and make mistakes and be curious and ask questions and maybe ask for support from other people and do this thing in that safe space where it's like a no judgment, judgment free zone. And that doesn't mean that the mind won't judge, because that's what our mind does. It'll constantly do that, especially with a newer skill that we might feel uncomfortable with. And so I like to see it as a practice similar to our breath. If you do meditation and you return back to the breath as an anchor, it's just returning back, having that mindfulness intention as your anchor. I like to often talk about it as an experiment. So whatever that skill is, whether it's through mindful art activities or through coaching with something else that you're really interested in, just that we can hold it as an experiment and have more of noticing that nervousness or those body sensations we might be feeling as perhaps excitement instead of terror or anxiousness or nervousness. And it actually does respond and show up in the body very similarly. It's just how we label those body sensations and those thoughts. So yeah, that's really important for me and the people I work with, is just holding it softly with mindfulness.
And we all have a journey too. For me, the whole mindset journey that I went on has been multiple. It seems like almost every couple of years I have to go on another mindset journey where it's like, okay, I finally evolved to my highest being and I have to now transform and transcend who I became. And it's always a process for me because I have gained an abundance of wisdom over the years, read many books, articles, blogs, podcasts, all that stuff. I have given myself an opportunity to learn and to be a learner, a lifelong learner, as you said yourself. And that helps me grow into the next stage of my life because I'm getting older. All right. I'm still young now. I can go to the gym, run, no problems. But I do understand that as time goes, I'm going to become more wiser. And I can see that with my parents, where they are wiser from when they were my age. That is the process of life, right? We become wiser. And life is a journey where we are able to go through one change to the next change. And you might get stuck on a change. And it's similar to like when you're at the gym and you hit a plateau where it's like, I'm going to the gym, I'm doing the same workout I was doing, but nothing is happening in my life. So they plateau. And sometimes people plateau when they get stuck. They're doing the right things. Maybe they had a life coach, mindset coach, a mindful art teacher along the way, and they're going up in life. And then they finally get stuck and they're like, I don't know what to do. Right. So then it's kind of like at that point, it's like they hit a wall and it's kind of like they ran out of room on the canvas and they say, well, I guess this is my life already. I'm done. There's no more room to grow. How can you maybe instill a concept, and maybe something you think about or not, but beyond the canvas? What comes beyond, or what is placed on the canvas? The way of thinking beyond just what is in front of you, right? So in our life, there's always something going on. Right now, the birds could be chirping outside, the sun could be shining, my plants are probably growing in the garden. There's so many things that are happening, but I have to pay attention to that. And sometimes, like, we get to that roadblock. Finally, everything on the canvas is no longer white. It's some vibrant color. They're saying there's nothing else I can add. But then you kind of come over because you have already went through many shifts of your mindset. You have already done many years of your mindful art teachings. You might say, well, why not add a flower here? Why not add a tree? Why not add birds or clouds? So yes, they might have painted the whole bottom green and the whole top blue, and they said they're done. But there's so much more detail that we can add. How do you help people see the details of life and rather not so much of a blank canvas that they paint and they say is complete?
One thing, I have a couple of thoughts that come to mind. The first one, again, is around that judgment, because oftentimes when I'm working with people and they're feeling stuck, they're feeling like that's wrong or bad, that they shouldn't be in that place, that they're frustrated that they're stuck, they want to be somewhere else. What I also love about mindfulness and mindful art activities with that reflection in the mirror is that it is largely a practice of just simply noticing what's happening right now. So that also means noticing our judgment around where we are right now in this moment to not make that wrong. And so part of it is just deepening that awareness. And so a lot of the focus with mindful art is the process, not the final product.
Mm.
But what I've also found is that by having a mindfulness practice, by having a practice of noticing how I'm feeling right now and trying not to judge it, and also being curious, it naturally will lead to the next step, to the next thing, to moving through those blocks. I find that it takes time, right? Just like how everything in nature, I think of the seasons a lot, actually. We just finished winter here in Colorado, and it always looks so, quiet and kind of bleak and beautiful, but like there's not much on the surface during winter. But those roots are just soaking up soil and nourishment and, water that whole time. So sometimes things can look one way and it can be something entirely different. So I think that there often can be this natural ebb and flow. And so when there is this feeling of stuckness, part of the practices I share are just around noticing that, being aware of it, seeing how we can soften around it and not have as much judgment, and then having curiosity around what is it that lights us up? What are we curious about? What are potential really small steps we could do in just 5 minutes that doesn't feel overwhelming so we can start shifting that? So that's one thing that I really like to focus on. And then the other thing that I often will kind of just talk about in my coaching and with my teacher trainees, I love the question, hate the question of, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? And I'm a list person. I'm always writing goals and SMART goals and, micro actions and all the things. And at the same time, none of my 5-10 year goals have ever, they always look entirely different than what I imagined. And that's just been my story, of how life has emerged. But I kind of chuckle a little bit when I consider long-term goals and, considering the canvas question you asked, so what's beyond the canvas, to again hold it really loosely. And so that doesn't mean I'm apathetic. I like to really work towards my goals and have intentions, but to not hold the end goal so tightly in my hand. So again, it just goes back to that where I am right now. If I'm feeling really stuck or frustrated, or the students I'm working with are feeling really stuck and frustrated, oftentimes I'll bring up thinking about another place or time when they felt that, and seeing how they're in usually a very different spot now compared to many years ago. You sort of alluded to that earlier when we were talking. So I think there's lots of ways that we can engage the mind, which can be, we have negativity bias. We're always looking out for ourselves. We're always trying to protect ourselves. And so just not making that bad or wrong, knowing that that's what the mind does, and being more aware of our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, and having really simple tools and practices that we can do either by ourselves or in community or with a coach, just to have a bit more perspective and support as we, are each on our own paths and journey.
And to touch base on two of the things you said that can help anyone during that process is it's the process, not so much the final product. Mm-hmm. Number one. And then number two, remain curious throughout your whole life. And I'm not saying to go into the haunted house curious, but to be curious into what you can accomplish, to do the things that maybe you thought you have never done. For example, you might be afraid of heights and you might never even thought that you're going to go skydiving. And before you know it, you're in a plane getting ready to jump. And you might have been telling yourself over the years, as another example, is that you're not a good artist. I have told myself for many years, I wasn't a good singer. I'm not a good artist. My mom's a better artist, and I wouldn't do art. So it was at a certain point when I was like, you know what? I am a good singer. I am a good artist. Let me start to implement that. And it's so funny when you're working with children, I would just draw something. And so it would be like, because I worked elementary. And when I was doing special ed my last years of teaching, I would be with first, second graders, and we would have like quiet time or whatever. If someone wanted to do drawing, I might hang out with them, do some drawing, and I'll make like a little landscape photo. And then they'll always say like, oh, you're such a good drawer or whatever. I'm thinking in my head, oh, I never thought of myself that way. But to them, it's like, wow, you're so great. hanging around kids can be one of the
Mm.
best cures or best medicines for anyone who's down and out. So I would always give them the photo when I was drawing with them. And then they would take it home or they would do whatever they want. It didn't mean anything to me, but for them, it meant something. Where it's like, I have this beautiful piece of artwork, I have something to work toward. And I think the idea of working towards something, working toward a goal is healthy, but then understanding, enjoy the journey so too, because many people try to like rush and finish. And when they're there, they think happiness is there, but it's not.
Mhm.
And I heard a quote today, I believe. It was, when you reach the top of one mountain peak, the bottom of another mountain is going to be before you. Is we reach a goal. So it's like we give ourselves a 5 year goal, right? You know, like going back to what you said, we give ourselves a 5 year goal. When we reach it, what happens? There's no more goals. So it's always put a goal behind a goal, but at the same time, pay attention to now. And then to also be aware of how you were when you were younger, too. This is something I think about frequently, especially since I was a teacher. I had to understand when I was in third grade, I did a lot of bad things. So if I'm working with third graders, I'm going to expect those bad things too. And I can't judge them. I can't say, you shouldn't be this way, blah, blah, blah. I did it. When the glass of milk spills at the diner, yes, you want to yell. Yes, you want to scream. You're frustrated. I understand. But have you ever dropped a glass of milk, spilled a glass of milk? Probably, maybe. Don't damage that child at that moment. You did the same thing, probably. So, yes, there's going to be mistakes in childhood. You don't have to make your child, especially another person's child, have a trauma because it's causing you a moment of discomfort. It's part of the process. Everyone is going to have an opportunity to learn. And I think when you're going into like a class like yours to learn and to be open and to be vulnerable, is going back to like that child like mindset of, I'm ready to learn. I might not do good, but I'm ready to learn. And I think that's all we can really ask for at that moment, to be mindful, to be aware, to remain curious, and to see what happens, but to enjoy the process along the way. Because I'm sure after the end of the class, people are not talking about their photo, they're talking about what they did during class more so than, hey, look at my art picture. Do you love it? Praise me, appreciate me. They're not talking about that. They're saying, this was so much fun. I love all the things you did. They're worried about the techniques, the process during the class, not so much, thank you for the art picture or whatever you did during that class. It's the process. So getting people into that mindset of the process more so than of the journey. Is there anything you want to say on that?
You reminded me actually of a quote that I really love from Pema Chodron. And it's much longer than what I'm going to say, but
Mm-hmm.
she says, we call something good and we call something bad, but we really just don't know. And so I like that idea of what if we just remove those labels entirely? And that's part of what being curious about the process is, or what exploring something mindfully without judgment. Yeah, exactly what you were just saying. Most of the people that come to mindful art workshops that I have, they're really doing it as a way to explore creative meditation. So they're not, trying to create a picture that they want to hang up on their wall, or that they want to sell, or that they want to frame, even though they might end up loving what they make. Instead, it's more so, how can I give myself, 10 more minutes in my day when I'm super stressed out, and I can do this practice on my lunch break, and I can feel less stressed, and I can notice my breath, and I can make these marks and hear the sounds. So it's really a form of creative meditation. And then also, when you were talking earlier, I was thinking I encourage a lot of my people that join my teacher trainings to celebrate their wins and their accomplishments. I had a chat actually on one of our coaching calls, and we were talking about a teacher training that I had launched a handful of years ago. And it was after, like 7 years of working towards it. And they were like, oh, what did you do to celebrate? This was like 5 years ago. Like, what did you do to celebrate that? And I paused and I realized, something I had worked towards for many, many years. And by the time it was birthed into the world, I didn't even pause or take a moment to celebrate or recognize it. So that's something that I really try to practice more, and that I talk about on my coaching calls with other people. And I think that that's really common human nature as well, for us to just immediately look towards the next thing. Even if it's something really small that we can encourage ourselves, or, pat ourselves on the back, or share it with somebody and have that moment of excitement. I think that that helps to refill our well as we're on our journey, and honoring, who we are and what we're doing in the world a lot of times.
That just makes me think it's like, yes, we are always in a rush to get to the next thing. So it might be school where we get homework, we're trying to get it done really quickly. And then when we're done with our homework, we get to have fun. So we give ourselves
Mm.
tasks that we might see as fun, but we try to get them done very quickly. And so, just look at the work week, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We want it done on Monday, done on Tuesday, all the way to Friday. And Friday, we're like, I can't wait till the weekend starts, right? We're always in a rush for what's next. And I think it's just that typical work week. We don't give ourselves any freedom. We don't give our sense any sense of acknowledgement during the week. Because if I ask what you did on Monday, you might think like, well, what did I do on Monday? Right? Because we were always just completing tasks, completing tasks, completing tasks. But every day we have that opportunity to take a step back, to be grateful, and to pay attention to our day, whether it be being more mindful, understanding where we are. Maybe we're not creative today or as creative as we thought we were, but we still do some work. And it doesn't have to be our best work, but if we show up that day, then tomorrow is going to be easier. Because what I find is if you think you're not ready or you think you're not going to be adequate for that day, it could lead to a cascading downfall where you don't have those small victories, is what I call them. And we want a small victory every single day. It doesn't have to be big. So if you're writing a book and you have writer's block, write one word, small victory, right? Let's pay attention to that rather than you wanted to write 7 pages today. It didn't happen. We can't worry about that. The day is gone, but we can focus on that one word and we can share on that one word. And then tomorrow, let's write 2 words if we have to, 3 words. And then let's figure out how to inspire you during those days because you might not be inspired. You might be burned out. There's many different things. You just need a fire to kind of light you up. And then once you can do that, then it's like, oh, I got it. And then that writer's block that you had is gone. Sometimes there's writers who say, you know what, I'm going to leave my family. I'm going to go into a cabin into the woods and I'm going to be able to write. They take away all the outside stress and they give themselves an environment where they can be creative, be open, and then be free to write. So it just depends on where you are in life. You might be really stressed right now. Find a way to de-stress. Art, drawing, music, whatever you choose to de-stress is going to help you the next day. But if you choose not to de-stress because you're too tired, because you don't feel creative, you're just going to have a problem later on that we can fix today. So we try to fix as much as we can today rather than wait until tomorrow. So the process is part of what we have to focus for. So Cynthia, if you can, please give us a few last words and then tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, I want to say I love that image of the fire, tending to the fire. And even if it's just a little bit every day, and that might just be collecting sticks or, poking the fire and, these small things that we can do to keep that kindling and burning. So I love that. The one last thing I want to leave as a thought is we chatted about this right before we started. I usually think of 8 different ways that we most commonly self-sabotage ourselves or can block ourselves. It's usually what I've seen come up most when I've worked with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a workbook that lists off those 8 ways we can self-sabotage, as well as 8 different small micro action type prompts to get you moving, to kindle that fire a little bit. So I do have that on, I'll give you the link if you want to share that, but it's a free workbook people can download. Or you can also find me on my website at mindfulcreativemuse.com.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely put the link in the information, the description box below, so everyone can have that link to check out the workbook. And one of the biggest reasons why many people don't go past their true self is because they self-sabotage. So understanding that, okay, how can I not self-sabotage myself is going to be important and critical to know so you can get past to the person that you want to become. And sometimes we just have to get a little bit of information, get a coach like Cynthia, and put ourselves on the right track to a better mindset, to be more mindful and to be more creative. I want to thank you so much, Cynthia, for coming on, sharing your experiences with me, what you do for the world in your coachings and your training. It was a huge pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Everyone, Cynthia Hauk.